This story is titled, My Boyfriend Hasn't Proposed After 5 Years, and I Feel Like I'm Running Out of Time. I'm Emily, 37 years old, and I've been with my boyfriend, Jake, for 5 years. 5 years of love, memories, shared holidays, and late night talks. 5 years of waiting. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who waited for a man to make a decision about our future. I always imagined love would be simple. Two people falling into step with each other, building something solid. And yet here I am, feeling like time is slipping through my fingers while Jake keeps telling me, we're not ready. But when will we be ready? When I'm 40? 45? When I can't have children anymore? I try not to think about it too much, but it's becoming impossible. Especially when my friends are getting engaged, married, starting families. And me? I'm stuck in this endless cycle of waiting. Jake and I met when I was 32. He was charming, funny, the kind of guy who made everyone feel like they were the only person in the room. I was drawn to him instantly, and when we moved in together after a year, I thought we were on the same page. But every time I brought up the future, our future, his answer was always the same. We're not ready yet. First, I accepted it. Maybe he needed time. Maybe he wanted to feel more stable in his career. But then a year passed. Then another. And now, 5 years later, nothing has changed. Except me. I feel restless, anxious, like I'm watching my own life pass by from behind a glass wall, unable to reach out and grab the things I want most. One night, after another painful conversation where he told me to just be patient, I found myself sitting alone in the dark, scrolling through old pictures on my phone. Pictures of us in the early days, smiling, laughing, full of hope. And then I saw it. A picture from 3 years ago. A sunset at the beach, my head on his shoulder. I remember that night so clearly. I had asked him, do you think we'll get married someday? He had kissed my forehead and said, of course, just not yet. That was 3 years ago. How many times has he said, just not yet? How many times have I accepted it, like a fool? The next day, I made a decision. I needed answers. Jake and I were supposed to have dinner together, but I could barely focus on my plate. The words sat heavy in my chest, my stomach twisting with nerves. Finally, I put down my fork and asked, Jake, do you ever see yourself marrying me? He hesitated, his fingers tightening around his glass. Em, we've talked about this. No, we haven't, I said, my voice shaking. Not really. You always push it away. But I need to know, is marriage something you actually want? With me? His jaw tensed. He looked uncomfortable. I love you, you know that. But marriage is a huge step. I don't think we're there yet. I felt something inside me crack. After 5 years, Jake? If we're not there now, when will we be? Silence. A long, agonizing silence. Finally, he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. I just don't want to rush into something and regret it. Regret it? I stared at him, my heart pounding. He wasn't just unsure, he was afraid. Afraid of committing to me. Afraid that I wasn't worth that kind of promise. I pushed my chair back, my appetite completely gone. I think I need some space. His eyes widened. Wait, don't do this. I'm not breaking up with you, Jake, but I need to figure out if this is enough for me. Because I don't think I can keep waiting for something that might never happen. I walked out before he could say anything else, my heart racing. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep waiting forever. I spent the next few days at my best friend Rachel's house, trying to make sense of everything. 5 years, she said, shaking her head. That's a long time to wait for someone who keeps dodging the question. I sighed. I love him, Rach. I really do, but I can't help feeling like I'm wasting my time. She hesitated before asking, do you think he's waiting for something? Or someone else? I flinched. You mean like if he's keeping his options open? Rachel shrugged. I don't want to put ideas in your head, but it just seems like he's stalling for a reason. That thought haunted me for days. Was Jake waiting for something better to come along? Was he staying with me just because it was comfortable? I needed answers. So I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I went through his phone. I know, I shouldn't have. I hated myself for even thinking about it. But the fear inside me was stronger than my guilt. And what I found shattered me. A text conversation with his best friend, Mark. She brought up marriage again last night. I just don't know, man. You love her though, right? Yeah, but something's missing. I can't explain it. I stared at the words, my heart pounding in my ears. 5 years. 5 years of love, of believing we were building something real. And all this time he felt like something was missing? I put his phone down and walked to the bathroom, my hands shaking. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time, I saw it. The exhaustion, the sadness in my own eyes. I had been holding on so tightly to something that was already slipping through my fingers. Jake wasn't going to marry me. Not because he needed more time. Not because he wanted to wait for the perfect moment, but because he didn't want to. The truth hit me so hard I could barely breathe. I was running out of time because I had wasted it on someone who never planned on choosing me. And the worst part? He never had the courage to tell me. That night, I packed a bag. Jake came home to find me stuffing clothes into my suitcase, my hands moving on autopilot. "Em, what are you doing?" His voice was sharp with panic. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I saw the messages, Jake." He froze. "You think something is missing," I said, my voice breaking. "After 5 years, you still don't know if I'm enough for you." He ran a hand through his hair, his face pale. "Em, don't." My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. I'm not mad. I deserve someone who doesn't have to think about whether I'm the one. I deserve someone who's sure. Jake reached for me, but I stepped back. "I spent 5 years waiting for you to choose me, Jake. But I'm done waiting." I zipped my suitcase, took one last look at the life I had built with him, and walked out the door. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I don't remember much about the drive to Rachel's house. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, and my heart was racing so fast it felt like I might pass out. But the one thing I did remember, the one thought that kept replaying in my mind, was that I had wasted 5 years on someone who was never going to love me the way I deserved. Rachel opened the door before I even knocked. One look at my face, at the suitcase in my hand, and she pulled me into a hug. Oh, Em. That was all it took. The tears I had been holding back for days came flooding out, and I sobbed into her shoulder like a broken child. I wasn't crying over losing Jake. I was crying over the years I couldn't get back, the time I had spent loving someone who never saw me as enough. After a while, Rachel pulled back, brushing the hair out of my tear-streaked face. "Tell me everything." So I did. The conversations, the waiting, the messages I found, the moment I finally realized I wasn't his forever. I was just his for now. Rachel's expression darkened. I never liked him, I let out a weak, watery laugh. "You could have told me that before I wasted 5 years. She shook her head. "You had to see it for yourself, and I'm proud of you for walking away." Proud. That word hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. Because for the first time in a long time, I actually felt proud of myself too. The first few weeks after leaving Jake were strange. I expected to feel heartbreak, regret, maybe even a little desperation to go back. But instead, I felt relief. The weight I had been carrying for years, the doubt, the insecurity, the waiting was gone. Of course, Jake called. He texted. He even showed up at Rachel's house once, but I refused to see him. His messages were the same over and over. "Please, let's talk." I didn't mean what I said in those texts. "I love you, Em. Don't throw this away." But the truth was, he had already thrown it away. By not choosing me, by making me doubt my worth for 5 years, by never being brave enough to tell me that I wasn't what he wanted. And I wasn't going to let him back in, just because it was easier than being alone. 3 months passed. I started therapy. I focused on myself, on healing, on rediscovering the pieces of me I had lost in that relationship. And one day, as I sat in a coffee shop, sipping a latte and reading a book, I overheard a conversation at the table next to me. A woman, maybe in her early 30s, was talking to her friend. "He keeps saying he's not ready," she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But it's been 4 years. Shouldn't he know by now?" Her friend hesitated before responding. "If he wanted to, he would." Those words sent a shiver down my spine. If he wanted to, he would. It was so simple, so painfully true. I had spent 5 years waiting for a man who didn't want to, who kept stringing me along with "not yet" and "we're not ready." But love isn't about waiting, it's about choosing, every single day. And Jake never chose me. I wanted to reach out to that woman and tell her everything, warn her, shake her, make her see what took me 5 years to learn. But I didn't. She would have to figure it out for herself, just like I did. A year later, I got an email from Jake. It was long, emotional, filled with regret. "I think about you all the time," he wrote. "I should have fought for us. I should have married you when I had the chance." And for a brief moment, I felt it. That old ache, the sadness of what could have been. But then I smiled, because I knew, deep in my heart, that I wasn't supposed to be with someone who only realized my worth after I left. I deserved more. I deserved someone who wouldn't need 5 years to decide if I was enough. I deleted the email without replying. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who kept you waiting, share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.